Welcome to the channel. My name is Dylan. Want to hear a story? This one's heavy. Grab a beer. When I was 19 years old and in my first year at college, I was really gung-ho about being openly queer, and I attended this event that was hosted by the LGBTQA program at the university. I'd been feeling like maybe I wasn't a girl for a long time by then, but I just told everyone I was not straight and liked girls, you know. Months before this, my grandmother died, and my dad sat my brother and I down the night before the funeral and told us that she was transgender and transitioned while she was raising him, and he told us all these stories about the hate she'd experienced and all the ways it had put her career and her safety at risk. He said that she never wanted her grandchildren to know, and he was only telling us now because he didn't want us to get caught off guard if someone brought it up at the funeral. No one ever did, by the way. She was a single parent transitioning in the 1980s, and there were all these stories she could have told me, and I never got to hear them from her. So, I went to this event hosted on campus for Transgender Day of Remembrance. It was a small event in the library. There would be speakers and a candlelight vigil for all the trans people who had been murdered that year. And we would also watch a movie. This movie was a true story about a 21-year-old trans man named Brandon Tina, who was violated and murdered in small-town Nebraska in 1993. That movie was called Boys Don't Cry. We're coming up on the 20th anniversary of this movie. It was released in October 1999. Boys Don't Cry is the debut feature of writer-director Kimberly Pierce, who would go on to direct a movie called Stop Loss, which is an Iraq War movie, and the 2013 Carrie reboot. Yeah, she is also a cis lesbian. Let's just pocket that for later. Notably, it is the only film with a transgender male character to ever be recognized at the Oscars, with Chloe Sevigny nominated for Best Supporting Actress and relatively unknown Hilary Swank winning Best Actress for her portrayal of Brandon. Same deal at the Golden Globes.
This is Hilary Swank's first Oscar nomination. She lived as a boy for 1 month to prepare for the role of Tina Brandon, a true story of a girl living as a boy in Nebraska.
And there have only been 15 feature films about trans men ever, in contrast to about 70 about trans women. Don't get too excited. Among those 70 are a lot of serial killers and a lot of Ace Ventura, and trans men get mostly sympathetic portrayals by comparison. But all this to say, if you have ever seen a trans man in a movie, it's probably this movie. I'm gonna head into the synopsis now, but just a heads up, this movie is a post-mortem biopic, not a documentary, and I'll be describing the events of the movie, not what actually happened. We'll get into that later. We open on Brandon driving down a country road alone at night, glancing at us in the mirror. We're formally introduced to him at the end of a transformation sequence, his cousin trimming his hair and advising him how big a sock to put in his pants. It's a nice choice to not let us see the before stage and only see Brandon how he wants to be seen. He meets a girl named Nicole, introduces himself as Billy, and has a lovely night with her. This guy loves women. But whoops, Nicole's brothers found out their sister was seduced by a lesbian, and they're not happy about it. They chase him home and yell slurs at him. His cousin is also berating him for letting this happen. Brandon's still enjoying himself. Then this happens.
Oh, I don't know what went wrong.
You are not a boy! That is what went wrong! You are not a boy!
Tell them that. They say I'm the best boyfriend they ever had.
Do you want your mother to lock you up again? Is that it? Is that what you want?
No.
Then why don't you just admit that you're a dyke?
Because I'm not a dyke.
And boom, there's a character introduction. Now, Brandon's drinking in a bar, meeting a totally different girl. Her name is Candace. But oops, this older man also wants to make moves on Candace. So they fight, chaos ensues, and Candace's friend John Lauder shows up and busts them out before the cops get there. Brandon is really excited he got in a fight. John notices Brandon has small hands.
You have got the tiniest hands.
No?
Yeah.
They're big.
And he ends up getting in a car with them to go to a party 70 miles outside of Lincoln. Brandon wakes up in the middle of nowhere and calls his cousin to let him know where he is. They discuss how Brandon isn't on hormones and hasn't had surgery because it's inaccessible to him, and the cousin tells Brandon he can come back home, but no more bars or girls. But that's his two favorite things! Turns out he's at Candace's house, and she has a toddler. Brandon tells her he has a kid of his own, and shows her a picture of him with the girl from the roller rink, claiming she's his fiancée, just bullshitting completely. And then he immediately goes to a bar with the girl. They're hanging out in this new friend circle he has when this girl walks in. It's Chloe Sevigny, the most beautiful girl Brandon has ever seen. Her name is Lana Tisdale, and she and the other girls go up to sing karaoke. John is possessive, but Lana and Brandon are just staring at each other. They leave, John is really possessive, and they invite Brandon to get in the car and keep hanging out, and he does. Now we're in Act 2. Everyone's chilling outside now, drinking beer and dicking around with the truck. Brandon says his real dream is to travel.
Memphis, Graceland, Tennessee.
Dick, Graceland is in Memphis, and Memphis is in Tennessee.
I know.
So he's maybe a little uneducated. The boys pressure him into bumper skiing for machismo points. Lana is a little impressed, but when Brandon falls down and John encourages him to go again, she objects. Brandon is lying in bed thinking about her. But oops, he's on his period. He can't get the blood out of his jeans and doesn't have the supplies, so he has to go to the store. But guess what? Lana's there! He has to be sneaky. Lana is trying to get the clerk to sell her beer even though she's underage, and it seems like she's an alcoholic. Brandon buys the beer for her even though he's also underage, he just has a better fake ID, pocketing and stealing the tampons. Lana is clearly high on something, really likes the cheap plastic rings at the counter, and when an older man tries to come on to Lana, Brandon insists he walks her home. He's a real ladies' man, and she appreciates the company. He also says this.
That way I let John tie you up to the back of a truck and drag you around like a dog.
No, I just thought that's what guys do around here.
He helps her carry her drunk mom off the couch, makes her a hangover cure, and surprises her with one of those cheap dollar store rings. It's pretty cute. Brandon has a little suit-up sequence where we see him binding by wrapping ace bandages around himself. By the way, if there are any baby trans in the audience, don't do this. You will crush your ribs. Back with the family, we learn that apparently Lana wrote letters to John while he was in prison, but she isn't proud of it. Brandon bullshits some more about his family and gets observed by Lana's mother.
I can believe you got a model for a sister. You're like a little movie star yourself.
The family seems to be loyal to each other, but it's kind of a toxic environment, so Lana and Brandon hang out on their own and bond over this Polaroid camera Brandon has. Brandon drives everyone to work because he's sober, and some white girls call them white trash, so they get in a race. But the cops try to pull them over for speeding. John leans into Brandon's ear and tells him to go faster, which he does, but he doesn't get away. Wouldn't you know it, the computer is down and they can't run his license right now. The cop asks him where he lives. Candace doesn't want to speak up, so Lana says he's living with her. He gets off with a warning. John is very mad at Brandon for getting caught and makes him take all the blame. Brandon's like, no thank you with all that, so John starts losing his shit and pulling everyone out of the car, starting with Brandon. Keeps Lana and his sister, who are still on their way to work, leaving Brandon, this other guy, Tom Nissen, and Candace stranded.
That's my car.
The three of them make a campfire, and Tom tells Brandon that John is unstable and has been in a mental hospital before, claiming he is the only one who can control John. He says that when he and John were in jail, they self-harmed together to curb their violent impulses. Tom hands Brandon the knife and says,
Try it.
and Brandon's like,
I guess I am a pussy compared to you.
Back at Candace's house, Brandon receives a subpoena for Tina Brandon and writes a note to Candace that he's leaving. Knock knock, it's Lana. Oh, he's so happy to see her, but he has to tell her he's leaving right now. They kiss, and Brandon gets up to leave, and Lana asks to come with him. He asks if she wrote John those letters, and she says yes, when she was 13. They kiss some more, and he goes to Lincoln, which is clearly Dallas, Texas. Back at his cousin's, Brandon shows him pictures of Lana and says he's gonna ask her to marry him. But Cousin Lonnie is unimpressed and thinks more girls will only bring more trouble. Brandon attends his court date for Grand Theft Auto, but when they call his dead name, he doesn't leave his seat and gets marked as failure to appear. Instead, he goes to the factory Lana works at, and they have a little Romeo and Juliet sequence, and then they go have sex. He goes down on her, and there's a very sensual and long orgasm sequence that reportedly caused more issues with the MPAA than the actual murder scene. Lana later tells her friends about it, and there's an implication that she noticed that this was cleavage, and that was a strap-on, but Brandon makes her so happy she doesn't mind. The plot of this movie kind of relies on Hilary Swank being unclockable, huh? Brandon's 21st birthday has arrived, and everyone pretty much knows he and Lana are together now. You know who's unhappy with this turn of events? That's right, it's John, coming into Lana's bedroom uninvited to try to convince her Brandon isn't worth her time. And in fact, she should be grateful to John for protecting her from him. He threatens Brandon.
You gotta remember, little man, this is my house.
John's feeling violent. Lana comes to Brandon to tell him she's quit her factory job and wants to run away with him to Memphis, but he tries to convince her to stay in Falls City with him. A ticket arrives for Lana, and Brandon insists on paying it, but uh-oh, the cops have run his ID and know who he is.
Wow. This Tina chick seems pretty messed up.
And he gets put in the women's jail. Act 3. Candace finds the bloody jeans and the subpoena in her house and puts 2 and 2 together. She tells Lana, and Lana goes to jail to get him out. She asks him why he's in the women's place. Brandon claims to be intersex, something the real Brandon was known to do.
It's a person who has both girl and boy parts. Brandon's real name's Tina Brandon. Oh, see, Brandon's not quite a he. Brandon's more like a shut up.
And struggles with his words. Lana says she doesn't care, pays his bail, and the Cure song plays as they run off together. This is where everything starts going to shit, so if you want to skip ahead, click here. John and Tom push a drunk Candace to tell them where Brandon and Lana are. They're having some more sex, and Lana wants to touch him back, but he won't let her. John and Tom come into Lana's mom's house shouting that they couldn't trust Brandon, dump out the bag with all his trans stuff.
Here, look at this. The grafted skin will mimic the loose skin of the natural male penis. Get this sick shit away from me!
Lana and Brandon arrive and are confronted. They accuse Brandon of lying about his kid and his name. Even the mom calls him a sickness. Lana is accused of being a lesbian. John and Tom want to take a look at what's in his pants, and Lana jumps in saying she'll look herself and then come out and tell him. They don't believe her. The guys pin Brandon down and rip his clothes off, forcing everyone to look. At the police station, Lana's mother tells her to abandon him.
And everything Tina told us was lies. Everything.
I won't show this part, but Tom and John capture and beat Brandon, driving him to a secondary location. And there's a brutal and graphic double rape scene juxtaposed with Brandon detailing the scenario to the sheriff, reliving the experience to a cop who is trying to get him to admit he's a woman. The men make him promise to keep their secret.
Because if you don't, we'll have to silence you permanently.
Yeah, of course. I mean, this is all my fault. I know.
He manages to escape and get medical attention, but Lana's mother doesn't want it in her house, so he's not welcome there. He goes back to Candace's, where he takes a shower and burns all his Polaroids. Lana's mother warns John and Tom that the rape has been reported. Lana finds Brandon, who admits everything he ever lied about to her, and asks her again to run away with him. They have some more sex, and this time Brandon lets her touch him. John and Tom show up at Lana's house with guns, asking if they're here. Brandon escapes out the window, and Lana goes with them to Candace's to try to stop them. Brandon and Candace are still there, and Brandon is trying to protect Candace and her baby. Lana's last words to Brandon before John shoots him are,
Tina! Please get out my baby, Dad, please! Why didn't you leave? We can still do it.
Brandon and Candace are shot in front of the toddler, Brandon being stabbed and shot one more time before the men leave. Lana is pulled away from the body later by her mom. She reads a note Brandon left in his pocket and drives to Memphis alone. Roll credits. Brandon Tina was buried in Lincoln, Nebraska, with the tombstone reading his dead name and the epitaph, daughter, sister, friend. He would be turning 47 this year. I'm not going to spend too much time talking about the factual inaccuracies, since I'm mostly here to talk about the film. The movie depicts the murder as a double homicide, but in real life it was a triple homicide, the third victim being Philip Devine, a disabled black man who was dating Lana's sister. Both characters were omitted from the movie entirely, which is kind of why I scoffed reading reviews of this movie that praised its depiction of race issues. Like, bitch, where? If anything, the movie is about being white. There is no evidence that Lana was at the murder scene, and the real Brandon refused to answer the police's questions about his transsexuality. The most important change for our purposes in this video is that the real Lana Tisdale sued the producers over her depiction in this movie, thinking her character was lazy white trash, a lesbian who did nothing to stop a murder, and of course in real life, Lana did not stay by Brandon's side to run off with him into the sunset when she found out he was transgender. She left him. This is a narrative drama, and there's a couple stories writer-director Pierce has chosen to highlight. The romance between Brandon and Lana, a growing awareness that these people Brandon is staying with are dangerous, and a more subtle thread of Brandon's past mistakes catching up with him. But first and foremost, it is a romantic tragedy. So is this movie important? That vague word that gives a movie cultural significance? I don't think it can be argued that the film is not culturally significant, though for better or worse is something people seem to disagree on. It was certainly better for Hilary Swank, who was only paid $3,000 to be in this movie, but went on to much bigger and better things. Boys Don't Cry follows in the grand tradition of sympathetic dramas about queer people ending in death by hate crime, intending to shock the general public into voting for anti-discrimination protections, and when a movie is big like this, that does work. But it's also very easy when you're watching a story about a hate crime where you look more like the aggressor than the victim to come out of the movie thinking, wow, how horrible. I'm so glad I wouldn't violently destroy someone like that. And if you look more like the victim, it's easy to think, guess I'm probably gonna be violently destroyed by, age 21. All the same, this movie is important to me because it came at a time I really needed it. And it's still novel to see a trans man on screen even today. Seeing something like this can really wake you up to your own identity, and I know a lot of transmasculine people have stories like mine about the first time they saw it. But it's kind of left a bad taste in our mouth over time, hasn't it? In 2016, 2 years after the film was shown at my school, Kimberly Pierce herself did a screening of the movie at Reed College, which was protested by transgender students who objected to the omittance of Philip Devine, claiming that as a lesbian, Brandon's story was not hers to tell, and most vocally casting a cisgender woman in a trans male role. Now, casting cis actors in trans roles is a problem because it takes a side in the debate on whether we are really women or men, but I found it difficult to be too outraged by Hilary Swank in this movie. The real Brandon was never on hormones and never had any kind of surgery, which isn't irrelevant to the story, and we're gonna try to find a trans male actor who hasn't medically transitioned at all, but is willing to be out as trans and willing to take his pants off in front of the camera in 1999. From what I know about Brandon, I'm sure he would have preferred a male actor, so yes, it is disrespectful in a way. But when I started researching this video, I noticed that Pierce was specifically scouting masculine lesbians for the role. I found this quote from a CNN interview she did where she talks about what she found so compelling about Brandon's story. People were focusing on the spectacle of a girl who had passed as a boy because that is so unfamiliar to so many people. Where to me, I knew girls who had passed as boys, so Brandon was not some weird person to me. Brandon was a very familiar person. On the DVD commentary, she says she wanted to reframe the crime to emphasize the relationship between Brandon and Lana because she saw it as a great love story. I keep finding references to this deleted Pop Matters article where she says that Brandon was an invention of Tina's imagination to satisfy his need to be with women. Oh my god. Oh my god, this is a lesbian movie. In many ways, Boys Don't Cry is right at home with other films from the time like Fight Club or American Psycho as an examination of toxic masculinity in a state of crisis. But if it was supposed to be so progressive, why did so many reviewers come out of the movie still calling Brandon she? It's clear that Brandon was the victim of a hate crime, but the question of whether it was a transphobic or homophobic attack is less clear in the text of the film. In the movie, the character Brandon's desires are immediately defined by his attraction to women, and his primary character trait is deceptiveness. He's a con. He uses fake names, fake IDs, has a fake family, has fake stories. Living as a man is just another in a long series of cons to get his truest want, the love of a beautiful woman. When Lana's mother says everything Tina told us was lies, it's basically true. In addition to the threat about Brandon's lies catching up with him, the movie wants Brandon to admit he is a woman, and Brandon will not. With this framing, the rest of the movie comes together. Starting with the thesis.
Why don't you just admit that you're a dyke?
Because I'm not a dyke.
As with most three-act romances in the modern day, the midpoint comes when Brandon and Lana have sex for the first time, which Lana describes as unlike anything she's ever experienced. It's shot like it's unlike anything she's ever experienced. And Brandon is only focusing on her this time. This scene is about her pleasure. It's implied that Lana almost caught him, but has decided it's okay. When John confronts her about sleeping with him, she says this.
Always no big he-man like you. There's just something about him.
After Brandon is arrested and put in the women's jail, the story changes real life and has Lana dramatically declare that she doesn't care what you are, she loves you, Brandon. They have sex again, and Lana begs.
I'm gonna touch you the way you touch me.
But Brandon won't let her. He's not ready for her to see. There's still time in the movie, so we know that this will be resolved later. Of course, the next thing that happens is him being outed, violated, and sent to the police station. Throughout this whole process, the antagonists are demanding that he and Lana both admit they're lesbians, which Brandon denies, right up until the point that the sheriff forces him to admit he has a sexual identity crisis.
You what?
Sexual identity crisis.
A line Swank delivers with the same pain as describing where they stuck it in. It's only after this trauma that Brandon drops the charade and admits he's transgender to Lana, along with everything else he's ever lied about.
What were you like before all this? Were you like me, like a girl? Yeah. Like a long time ago. Then I guess I was just like a boy, girl. And I was just a jerk. It's weird, just finally everything felt right. Look, I never been on the highway or the Grand Canyon or any place like that. Until I came here, I never even been out of Lincoln. I never even met my dad. He died before I was born, and my sister ain't no model out in Hollywood.
This is when Brandon finally lets Lana undress him and is, as Pierce describes, the first moment he is ready to receive love. I'll say it again, the love Brandon has been chasing since the very first scene is rewarded to him when he admits he's a liar.
You're so pretty. You're just saying that because you like me. No. I don't know if I'm gonna know how to do it. I'm sure you'll figure it out.
Like, I've seen this. This is the inexperienced straight girl, and this is the older butch. I've seen this. I know what this means. What really kills me is that final line. Brandon, pinned up against a wall with a gun to his face, the whole world against him and no remaining family to support him, looking at the only character in this film who still loves him and is still on his side. He hears the last words he will ever hear. and she calls him Tina. Let's not get confused. Brandon is, in the text and in real life, a transgender man. But I do think the subtext of a lesbian romance is unmistakably there, even if I had to research the screenwriter and rewatch the film with a critical eye. The idea that trans men only call themselves men because they haven't realized they can be happy as butch lesbians is the position of outright transphobes as well as people who just kind of don't get it, and it's super harmful to us. It's the mindset that makes people comment on our top surgery photos to say they're heartbroken, that it's tragic or a waste. Guys, I'm bisexual. I tried to be a butch woman for years. It's just not the same thing. It's just not. Brandon Tina was not masculine. He was a man. Let me just quickly cover my ass here. I'm not trying to argue whether what happened to Brandon Tina was homophobic violence or transphobic violence. It was clearly both. What I am arguing is that a lesbian director took a story that a trans man was unable to tell himself, and it was filtered through her own identity and experience as a lesbian. Brandon Tina was a real person, and he was not a lesbian. He was boyish since childhood, broke dress code in his Catholic school to wear the boys' uniform, he tried to enlist in the US military but failed the written exam because he listed his sex as male. He insisted he be treated as the man he was, and in this movie, he's written as a butch who just needed to be true to herself. But he was true to himself from the very beginning. The director just heard his story and thought it sounded like a lesbian romance she wanted to tell. So would we have been better off without this film? Brandon already had a documentary. He didn't need it retold for the big screen by someone who wasn't there, and who was more interested in shining light on the lesbian voice than the transgender one. Young trans people probably could have done without the long, brutal, lingering depictions of this sensationalized hate crime. But all the same, I'm glad at least something like this exists. Trans men have, in history up until now, lived and died much more in the shadows than trans women. The gap in visibility is so huge that apparently a lot of people in my comments think there are literally less FTM people in the world. That's not true. It's close to 50-50, just like cis men and women. If you're interested in why that might be, Jackson Bird has a great video on the subject. I'll leave it in the description. It mostly has to do with how it's easier for us to go stealth than it is for trans women, so most guys do. And a consequence of that is that trans guys are less likely to see themselves in others. Representation matters, but you don't need me to tell you that. To all the boys who grew up on this movie, you don't need to throw its memory in the garbage. This movie is still a stepping stone turning thoughts into a reality for a lot of young trans guys. It's still, 20 years later, one of the only movies even offering us this experience of seeing ourselves. It's aged poorly, and I've thought about it too hard. But I just want to tell you that your identity is not deceptive, and you are not unlovable. To Brandon, and to my grandmother, I hope you would be proud of how far we've come, and I will try to build a world where the trans kids who come after me never have to suffer the way that you've suffered. Thanks to everyone who's come to my channel since my last video, especially the Men's Lib subreddit, which I was happy to learn was not an MRA thing, and the good people of the serfs. I'm happy to have you here in my closet with me. If you're a fan of what I do and you want to support me, I'm raising money to get a hysterectomy. I have endometriosis, which makes me feel like I am having period cramps all the time, every day, and I don't like that very much. There's a GoFundMe link in the description, along with some of the reading material I used for this video.